Hey, I am calling the City of Menasha Administration Committee to order. Clerk Gaziazi, can you please do roll call? Did I say that? I'm sorry, Debbie.
Okay, that's all right.
Galiazi.
And if you'd also hit your button and sign in, please. So we've got Alderman Sevenick. Here?
Here.
Okay. Alderman Collier.
Here.
Alderman Kruger.
Here.
Alderman Zelinski.
Here.
Alderman Grady.
Here.
Alderman Benner.
Here.
Alderman Nichols.
Here, it's not looking for us to.
No, it's, okay.
Oh, excuse me. Now it should be. Is it blinking now?
Yes.
Okay. Then you can also, and then Alderman Taylor.
Hey, the first thing on the agenda are the minutes to approve. We have 2 minutes to approve. The first one will be the Administration Committee minutes from 6/19/17. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Alderman Sevenick.
Thank you, Chairman Kruger. I'll move for the approval of the Administration Committee minutes of 6/19/17.
Second.
We have a recommendation by Alderman Sevenick and a second by Alderman Collier. Is there any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Alderman Sevenick.
I'd like to offer my amendment. There was a copy available for everyone. As you recall, I'll wait for a second before I can discuss.
We already had a second.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. As you recall, Alderman Benner had requested that I, Alderman Kruger, and the city attorney meet on this particular issue. We did that. I thought there was supposed to be something on the agenda. Is it coming for the next meeting or what?
I will be talking with the city attorney about that, to put that on the agenda for next
Okay.
time.
But anyways, I just, there wasn't reflection of my opinion, what all actually happened. I thought we needed more detail, but just to inform this body that the meeting that we had with the city attorney and the chairman, I felt was positive.
All right, is there any other discussion? If not, if we can have a roll call vote, please,
On the amendment.
on the amendment.
What?
Or,
I don't know what the amendment is.
The amendment is the one that we passed out.
Okay. Does Alderman Collier, are you approving,
He seconded.
he seconded it.
he seconded the, excuse me if I could clarify this. I have that you, Alderman Collier, you seconded the approval of the minutes of 6/19/17.
Yes.
Is that correct? Did you also, I only have Alderman Sevenick making the amendments. Did you second the amendments?
No, I did, but I will at this time.
You can say no again, Artie. Okay.
No.
Okay.
No, I will.
So now we're going to vote on the amendment.
Okay, I'll be starting the vote, and this will be the vote on the amendments as they were presented in the packet. Is that correct,
Yes.
Chairman?
Has everybody voted?
You can tell, Steve, by, you can tell by who's lit up and who isn't. So Alderman Taylor has not voted.
Oh, okay. Alderman Nichols?
No, Alderman
Oh.
Taylor.
Okay, now,
Oh, they switched
They
spots.
switched spots.
Doesn't matter,
Oh.
the microphones are based upon the names on them.
Oh, they are, okay,
Yes.
okay.
So they switch spots, but they still show up in the opposite spots.
All right, okay. Okay, now we will go ahead and make a vote on the Administration Committee minutes total, 6/19/17,
As amended.
as amended. Or is there any discussion? Alderman Nichols.
I just wanted to note,
You have to actually click on her, Steve.
I am.
Just once.
Still nothing.
Did you turn off the voting?
voting has stopped, yes.
No, you still are on voting, Debbie.
Oh,
You're still on voting.
I stopped.
There you go.
Okay, Alderman Nichols.
Thank you. I just wanted to state that I was pleased with the minutes that were originally submitted by Clerk Aliazzi. I thought that they were reflective of the meeting. It is not, or it has not been customary to have minutes reflect verbatim conversation around a certain issue, and I'm concerned about the precedent that this may set for future meetings, and that's why I oppose the amendment, and I will oppose the amended minutes as well.
Alderman Stefanik.
And I would take the opposite view. I would want the community to know what it has been reflected in minutes, and I would hope that council members do more of this. I think it's a disservice to our community when we provide certain minutes that when there are important issues, that they're able to see actually more of what went on other than discussion ensued. So I would like to see more of this. I agree with you in to an extent that, yes, that doesn't have to take place all the time. But when you feel that there is something that is extremely important and that a point needs to be made, and that's why you need to do that. And that's why I did this. I felt very strongly about that. And I would hope that other council members do that. Yeah, we don't have to do that all the time. They don't have to be verbatim. But sometimes they need to be.
Alderman Benner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If anything, I would ask the attorney to provide some input on this, because I look at this in two different ways. Generally, what we call our minutes are more of a report of what happened within the meeting. And what this amendment is more of minutes of what happened in there. So it's more detailed, which is typically what minutes are, but we call our minutes, typically, again, our minutes that we approve and put on file are typically more of a report of what happened during that meeting. And this is just an extension of what that was, where it is more minutes. And I can certainly see both points based off of past practice of what we have done. But since this was asked for and put in as an amendment, I'm not so sure I'm overly concerned about it unless our attorney may. So I'd like to hear
Attorney
opinion
Kaplan.
from the attorney.
As it relates to minutes, what is required, or what you're required to have in them, is what occurred at the meeting. And so you would have who was at the meeting, motions that were made, the general topics of discussion, and things like that. When I talk to the clerk or others about taking minutes and preparing minutes, the thing to keep in mind is that minutes need to reflect, there can't be any debate about what occurred when you're reading the minutes. So if you pick it up and you read the minutes, and if someone else would read them and think, well, that's not how I saw it, then that is not something that's supposed to be in the minutes. There should be no debate about what's contained. And as an example, the first sentence says, was added to the agenda without authorization. That's a comment, and that's someone's personal opinion. That actually was not what was said at the meeting. What was said at the meeting is, we're not supposed to be on the agenda. That item, we're not supposed to be on the agenda. There was no discussion about it or anything like that. So inserting a comment like that without authorization is really somebody's opinion about what happened. And then so if you're reading through minutes and all of a sudden you see someone's personal opinion, that is not supposed to be contained. And that does pose a difficulty as it relates from a legal perspective, because obviously you don't put everything that everybody said. So who is it that's supposed to choose and select that someone else's opinion is more important than another person's opinion or what was said? But from a legal perspective, what happens is sometimes minutes are presented in court cases. And if they're approved by the body, guess what? I've seen where that has come back to bite someone, which is a community, which is really why you need to just include not opinions in your minutes.
Is there any other discussion?
Nothing to say, that was your sentence.
She gave her opinion on it, and I take her opinion at her word. There's reasons why it was put in, and she gave her opinion. So if there's no other discussion, can we have a vote on the, oh, I'm sorry. Alderman Taylor.
When it comes to minutes, I've asked a few times to have why I voted for something or this way, and it doesn't show up, and I think our minutes could be much better than they are. I think the fire department has the best minutes of anybody. That you can read that, and it gives you a clear understanding of what happened in that meeting, and I think other departments should take that lead from the fire department, and I would like to see us up here. It's up to this body how we want to take our minutes, and the body can vote on it any time to change the minutes to reflect what we're saying. So, and furthermore, I think this situation here should go to closed session. Thank you.
I'm just going to make after Alderman Sevick made that brief point, I will state that that first line was mine, because on the minutes, when I submitted the subject matter, there was a line added to it, and I did have a discussion with the mayor, and it was supposed to be removed before the administration committee, and it was not. That's why that is on there. Alderman Stefanik.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I totally agree with what the city attorney is saying. We've been in this predicament in the past where actually the meetings were being like tape recorded, although they're video recorded and everything now, but there was a case where something between the city of Menasha and the town of Menasha where an alderman said something and they wanted the tapes and things like that. But I mean, they're recorded now anyways. So basically, you know, what's being said right now is probably would be used in a court over a piece of paper. I did this because Alderman Benner made a request that our group meet, and that I wanted to make sure that everything was understood as far as what discussion took place, so that when we went into our meeting, we understood where we were all coming from. And I think because of that, the meeting ended up becoming a more productive and positive meeting.
Attorney Captain.
There was just some explanation by the chair about why he put in that without authorization. And I'm not certain if the chair wants me to go into the discussion that we had, and I specifically asked the chair, what would you like to do in this regard? And he had indicated he was in a hurry and that he wanted me to talk to the mayor. And so I said, are you sure? Don't you want to just tell me what you want? And he said, no, I explained it all to the mayor. I will, you just go ahead, talk to the mayor. And so that is what I did. I talked to the mayor, and I understood that there was some discussion about a proposed amendment to the ordinance, and that was the other section. And so in the interest of ensuring that the agenda reflected everything that was going to be discussed at the meeting, for public open meetings' sake, I said, well, then we need to put this other section on there if we're going to be talking about that item. So that is my explanation of that. That topic never came up at the meeting. However, like I just said, without authorization, never came up at the meeting either.
Well, if you care to take a look at the tapes, I discussed that it was not supposed to be on the agenda. I did have a phone conversation with the mayor about it when I saw it. And I fully explained that that was not a section that I was even going to delve into. And we had the understanding, and I was told it would be taken off the agenda before the meeting. It was not. That is the only reason why that was stated at the beginning of the meeting and why it is in the minutes. Alderman Benner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Right after the attorney gave her opinion about putting this amended minutes into here, Alderman Seven had said something. He didn't have his microphone on, and then our conversation kind of digressed from there, and I got a little bit lost at that point. Could you fill me in on what was said? And then, because then you commented, and it kind of took off, and the folks over here, we weren't able to hear that. At least I wasn't.
Alderman Sevenik.
Sorry.
Alderman Sevenik.
Was it about that I agree with the city attorney about having?
You said, I wasn't sure I could hear it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I was just saying she had made comment about, sometimes you basically need to, address how the votes went and not so much everything that was verbatim because of the possibility of something going into court. And I agree with her on that. Sometimes the less said, the better.
Yep.
Okay, I agree with that. But when you feel extremely strong about an issue and when you put together that we met, I thought it was important that when we got together, we were on the same page, basically, of understanding. And I think because of that, I thought our meeting went very well, and I believe something positive is going to come forward from that.
Is there any other discussion? If not, can we have a roll call vote on approving the minutes from 6/19/17?
Your lights working? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, we should be ready to vote. Motion carried on roll call 7-1.
All right, we're going to move on to minutes to approve from the Administration Committee on 7/5/17. Is there a motion? Alderman Sevenik.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I'll move for the approval of the Administration Committee minutes of 7/5/17.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Alderman Sevenik, seconded by Alderman Collier. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, can we please have a roll call vote?
The chairman was doing that, not the clerk?
No, the clerk's doing it.
Oh, okay.
Motion carried on roll call 8-0.
Okay, moving on to action and discussion items.
Chairman, I've got kind of a point of order. I don't like this process. I hope, are we doing this just for the interim here? Because it isn't necessary to have a individual vote. There are votes, we are operating under Robert's Rules of Order. And by doing so, we can do things by voice vote.
Well, I was actually just following the mayor's lead on it,
Right.
where everything was going to be a recorded
I
vote.
think we need to address this in the future.
All right. Moving on to action and discussion items. Item number 1, we have Resolution 1717, a resolution approving the City of Menasha's liability insurance renewal through Cities and Villages Mutual Insurance Company in report of the Civic Summer Meeting. Attorney Captain, can you please explain it?
Yes, thank you. I prepared a memo updating the renewal process and some of the documents that I received at the summer meeting, which occurred on July 20th and 21st. As you're aware, the City of Menasha is a member of Cities and Villages Mutual Insurance Company, and as part of that, we have CIVMIC looks forward years out in order to ensure that the premiums that we're paying are don't fluctuate a lot from year to year. And so they have the current renewal package is for 2019 to 2020. And so what they are asking is then for a commitment from the City of Menasha to continue its membership in that mutual insurance company, and to in an agreement of the premiums for 2019 and 2020. They are based, the quotes are based upon our self-insured retention of $25,000. They also did give us, and I put down on the bottom of the memorandum, an optional self-insured retention of $37,500, which is the next level up. Of course, they have higher levels than that if we were interested in doing something like that. We are committed through 2018, and so this, as I stated, is for 19 and 20. I also provided information about the dividend that will be returned, and indicated that we typically just have the dividend payable March 1st, which is the first date that it would be available of the next year in 2018. We do have other options. There's 2 other options that are identified on that document that indicates what the dividend is. So if there's no motion that's necessary, if we just want to stay the status quo and have the dividend payable March 1st, 2018. Otherwise, if we wish to partake in one of the other 2 options, then a motion would be in order. And then I believe I did get, just before the agenda was sent out, I also did add in here, which is not listed on the memo, but I did include the workers' compensation and employers' liability insurance policy premium estimate in here. And then the final document is the 2008 premium projections. And we use these to base our budget projections on for 2018.
So we're looking for a motion just to bring this back to the, or up to the council?
It would be just the resolution indicating the City of Menasha's desire to stay with CIVMIC for the years 19 and 20, and then acknowledging those premium estimates for 19 and 20.
Thank you. Okay, do we have a motion?
So that does that with our 1717, right?
That is correct, yes.
That we recommend to the Common Council Resolution 17-17.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Alderman Sevenick and a second by Alderman Collier. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, could we please have a roll call vote?
Motion carried on roll call 8-0.
Okay, moving right along on action item number 2, we have an introduction to code compliance and enforcement property survey program and request for direction on an enforcement approach. Director Buck, if you can please explain.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, well, code compliance for Menasha has been primarily, at least from my understanding, primarily reactive in nature and really complaint-driven. My understanding, the council has requested a little bit more comprehensive or aggressive approach to code enforcement on all the properties throughout the city in previous years. So the Department of Community Development this year came up with what we call a property survey program. So it's sort of a systematic, multi-year property review cycle. So to kind of explain that, city is basically divided up into 32 survey areas. So we break each aldermanic district into 4 areas, roughly the same size as much as we can get them as far as number of parcels go. So ideally, we could complete 1/4 of each aldermanic district every year, and a 4-year cycle hit every property in the city. The division is intentional, so no individual aldermanic district gets hit in one cycle season, where all the complaints are going to, just District 5, and you're receiving all the complaints, and also that the code enforcement is kind of spread out throughout the city throughout that 4-year cycle. I guess it's important to point out that we, as far as community development, don't know how long it's going to take to survey all these properties. So though we're planning on a 4-year cycle, it could very well be very optimistic and take longer than that. But that's our goal, is to hit every property every 4 years. We would start in 2018. Typically, you want to start it around April, finish in October, September, and try to get all your properties done in that time period. For 2017, what we really wanted to do is take the rest of this year, and what we plan to do is take the rest of this year to kind of get a gauge at how long it takes to survey the properties for one, but more importantly, that's going to be the small amount of time. More importantly, it's the follow-up. So if there is any type of enforcement action on properties, that's where your big time sucker appears. So in 2017, we would pick a survey area and use it as a pilot and see how it's all working. We can always adjust it and go forward before we hit 2018. So the surveys really are going to address the exterior of properties only, as we can't enter properties. They would all be inspections from the sidewalks or from the street rights-of-way. So you'd review the properties. There's really 2 focuses. One is going to be the building itself, the primary structure on the site, and the other is the general site conditions. And there, in your packet, there was thought I had one. There's a little checklist that the surveyor is going to use to check off to make sure they're hitting all the same items on every single property. And it is important to say these have to be observable from the public right-of-way. We can't enter people's property. We can't go into their backyards. We can't go into their garages. You have to do it from the street. And the other thing that's really important to say is the things have to be currently regulated in our code and not be grandfathered or outstanding violations prior to code being adopted. I oftentimes get people saying, well, they can't do that. Our code says you can't do it. Potentially most often it was established prior. So it becomes a legal non-conforming situation or a grandfathered situation. We can't go after those in most circumstances. But anyway, so once the property is surveyed, primarily by our code enforcement specialist, but we'll also be using our building inspector and probably everybody in our department since we're very small. If any code issues are identified, what our thought for action would be is we would send out a letter contacting the property owner, let them know that some violations have been shown on their property. They should contact us and work with staff to set up a correction of the property. If they don't contact us within 30 days, and that would be the time frame we would give them to contact us, then we would go through with regular code enforcement action. So that would be your correction notice and possible citations after that. There's a caveat to that. If it's a life safety situation that's observed, we would do code enforcement right away. So basically what we would do is have the owner come in, say, I acknowledge that I have these issues. Hey, maybe I can't do it in 2 weeks. I'll get it done in 3 months. I'll get it done in 6 months. Work with staff to set up a compliance date. Have them sign that, acknowledge that, keep it in their property file and follow up on it, in a tickler. So when it comes up, we would go check that property. Again, if they don't want to work with the city and they don't contact us, we would just use the regular code enforcement actions. So the second year and any subsequent cycle years, we would look at any remaining properties that haven't been done in the previous year, obviously, and this is where it could stretch out, or we would hit the next cycle's designated survey areas. At the end of every cycle year, so probably in the winter of every year, we would report to the council, let you know where we stand, how many properties have been surveyed, how many had identified issues, if we got action plans, if we had to go to code enforcement, regular code enforcement, and just kind of let you know where we sit every single year as we go forward. But I guess what I'm really asking for from administration to forward to council is to give staff a little bit more direction. So as compliance and code enforcement has been driven mainly by complaints, I think there's a very, very high likelihood that many of the people in the community don't know what the codes are. They have not been touched. They may have been operating in a certain way or had their properties be a certain way for a lot of years. And we really want to kind of take a more friendly approach to say, hey, these are violations. We're not going to jump on you. We're not going to give you citations right away, but know they're violations and how can we get this working together to get it code compliant. However, because code compliance and property maintenance has been such a hot topic, I understand, you do have the option to go the other route, where we would just go straight code compliance. Usually it's a 15 to 30 day notice to correct a violation. If you don't, citations are issued. People have to potentially go to court, and those citations can keep piling on. It is often problematic for people of very meager means in that they'll pay their fine, but they can never catch up enough to actually do the work. And kind of a nicer and more friendly code compliance approach is what staff would be recommending as far as our property survey goes. Again, I think that hardline approach, for one, it's going to really reduce the amount of time a property owner can comply with code. That emphasis may not generate any more compliance than we would get by a more friendly method, which is problematic. The workload for code enforcement, the big amount of workload is going to be the follow-up. It's not the surveys. The surveys are easy to do. It's the follow-up and working with the individuals and the property owners, writing orders, going to court. That's incredibly time-consuming, and in a lot of cases, you'll drag on for years before you'll get any compliance, if you get any at all. So we're hoping to go forward with sort of the less hardline approach. But I wanted to get the council's direction on that. I mean, the survey is going to happen anyway, but how do you want us to be? You're going to be getting the complaints, you're going to be getting the calls. So that's really what I'm asking for. You want us to take more of a hardline, regular code enforcement approach, Or would you like us to try to work with the residents and maybe not get compliance as fast? But I personally think you'll get better compliance with a friendlier approach.
All right, thank you, Director Buck. Are there any questions? Alderman Benner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with the more friendly approach to this, but one thing I was wondering about, I think some people, when their properties get blighted, a lot of it is, and you identified some of it, that they just don't have the personal resources to address some of these, and there are programs to help subsidize this. When you send that letter out, would you be, I think we stand a better chance of getting people to call and focus on compliance and stuff if they know that there may be an avenue that could help them. Are we going to send anything along with that notice, let them know that there are some programs, some grants or some subsidies that could help out?
Sure, we can put something in that letter. Really what the letter is just going to say is contact staff, and let's work through it. We can put in there that there are programs available, and we can discuss those when you call.
You know, my thought is that if somebody gets it, they go, you know, first they're going to be frustrated, they're going to be upset, and they're going to say, I can't afford to do this, so they're not going to pick up the phone and call, or they're not going to come down to City Hall and say, you know, I just can't do this. They're going to try to just let it go, I think, and see what, and take a wait and see approach as to what the city's really going to do. And I think if they know that there's an avenue that might be able to help them, I can't help but think that a lot of folks want their homes to be nicer, but if they just can't afford it because they're hitting a hard stretch or something, and we've already identified last year at budget time that we were going to do some of that, well, I think if they know that, then I think they're more apt to call and try to make some arrangements to go forward in a positive fashion than to take that wait and see approach. So otherwise, I'm in favor of taking the kinder, more friendly approach, and to also let them know how we can help them, as opposed to just telling them that their property doesn't look good and they need to fix it, and you have 30 days to let us know how that's going to happen. You know, a lot of times people read those things, they read them negatively, and it becomes a negative thing. So
Sure.
Otherwise, yeah, I'm fine with the approach that you're taking, with that exception. Thank you.
Alderman Zelensky.
Yes, thank you. I really wish Mr. Paulzine could have been here for this, because I had some specific questions for him, but I guess we're talking about just this memo in general, what way we want to go with it. But what I would like to see, I don't mind taking the friendly approach for this, that the survey and everything, but I still think we need to take a hard line when we have complaints that come up, because somewhere the ball is getting dropped, and it's prevalent to some of these homes in some of these neighborhoods. I've had people came up here years ago about a property, and nothing was done. The ball was just dropped, and at some point, I think we should be bringing ordinances back up here, because that's what I heard before when Mr. Paulzine was up here. He said, none of these get enforced because the ordinances don't align. Is there something we need to start changing in our ordinances because I looked at one of the old meetings in 2015, when this came forward once about enforcement, that we can't win these in court because you bring them to court and the ordinances don't align with what we're trying to prosecute on them. And so I guess that's a question for you, Captain. What should we be doing to go forward?
Probably Director Buck.
Or Director Buck with ordinances.
A good opinion on this.
Well, our codes could definitely use a look through and an update. I'm still getting familiar with them after being here about a year. There are inconsistencies in their codes, different sections. Some have been, statutes have changed, making them no longer enforceable. But really what gets down to it at the end of the day, assuming all the codes are just great, and we should probably have maybe a workshop or something and describe how inspection happens and enforcement processes go forward, because as you alluded to, we have properties out there that receive multiple citations, don't show up at court, and we're really at the court's discretion at that point of what we can do. So, I mean, we can issue citations and citations, but if the courts are not backing us up on it, at that point, we just kind of sit. There's also all kinds of different situations that are out there as well as far as enforcement. Property owners can't be found. Property owners are really not known. Somebody passed away. Those all create really bad bottlenecks at the end of the process.
Of course.
But you are right. There are
Is
a
there
lot
any
of
way
instances in the codes where they are difficult to read, and in that becomes difficult to enforce as well.
Is there any way we can start putting these, once they're cited and the problems aren't resolved, how can we have it stuck with them when they're trying to sell the home or rent it or anything else? Is there a way we can go about that as a city standpoint?
Well, it depends on the degree of the violations. If it's uninhabitable, yes, we can
But if
tag
it's
it as uninhabitable. If it's more minor,
Portrails.
portrails become more difficult. We can't stop them from any use of their property because their portrails aren't.
So
aren't
for right
meeting
now,
code.
because this is still down the road, we're looking at 2018 April. Some of us might not even be here. What is Mr. Polzine's job as of right now? Just because I looked at the numbers from you, we put it in that one packet, I think, 3 meetings ago about what he has, the violations that came forward, and it's only been 73 violations that came forward, only 55 of them were closed. What is he doing with his time then? Because that's about 3 violations a week.
Well, he does a lot of investigation that don't have violations. He also not only does code enforcement, but he also works as a part-time CSO. He still works with the police department. He's only a part-time position with the community development department, and he also helps with CSO duties, trains CSOs.
I think
deals
that's
with
got to be
traffic.
brought forward.
But he does do a lot of code enforcement. Again, a lot of them don't show up on their follow-ups that may not have any
yes.
merit. He does a lot of follow-up to get compliance, so a lot of work with the same property owners, which shows up as one issue.
But it's
trying to get
multiple.
compliance, it takes longer. And then, also follows up with the city attorney, goes to court. So.
Do you think it would be more viable for him to spend more time in community development than being a CSO?
Well, what I want to do is, obviously, we're going to
For now, I'm saying,
we're still going to have
yeah.
complaint-driven
Yes.
code enforcement, but I want to see how much time the surveys are going to start actually taking, and see how much time. I don't anticipate that he's going to be able to do these surveys by himself. Some of these cycle years have lots and lots of properties in them, talking 2,000 properties.
Yes.
That's a lot of survey and even more follow-up. I suspect there'll be multiple staff people
I could do
doing
it from the road and point.
I need you to do the follow-up, not the surveying. We
Yeah.
do the surveying, it's the follow-up again.
But I wasn't on the council at the time when Polzine was hired. Was he meant to be a CSO and a code enforcement officer? Or?
Well, actually, Alderman Zelinski, that's starting to get a little bit off subject
Yeah,
there.
but-
We were going to concentrate on this. Mr. Polzine's position and what he's supposed to fill is for a totally another time and for another debate. So if we could
Okay,
stick
yeah.
to the what's being recommended here, asked of us. Is there any other discussions? Alderman Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Certainly, my district has probably the most older homes in the city and also the most rentals. And it's not usually the property owner that's not taking care of the property in my district. It's usually a landlord that doesn't want to take care of it. I've said this on the council before when Alderman Zelinski's dad was an alderman, and if everybody took care of their property like the Zelinski family does with their rentals, we wouldn't have this problem. And it can be done, and it does come at a cost, but they own a lot of property, and they do a nice job. I like this process, but I think the time frame is wrong on it. I would like to, you have a lot of people on very limited incomes, and I think the time frame that we should go out looking for these properties and identifying them is maybe at the end of the construction season, like November, and go out in November and December, and as we discover these, tell these people that, by April, when the construction season, when they can paint things, when they can have someone put new siding on or pour a driveway, when the construction season begins, then I think that's when the clock should start ticking for them. But I think it would be very beneficial to our taxpayers and residents that they get this notice coming much sooner than also in 3 weeks, 2 weeks, whatever the time frame is. So I would like to see that cycle change a little bit and start in the fall through the winter, and then as the construction season opens, weather permitting, then the issues the clock can start on them at that time. I've had the same concerns Alderman Zelinski has had with properties, and it's not under your administration, but in the past, we turn in things and we never hear about it, and then people call us and, this is this, but we never get any paperwork on things. We don't get a paperwork that said, yes, this was started. We heard a lot of things with the bridge tonight, did a lot of things, but we have no paperwork. And I think we need to say, okay, this was sent out for this property that there was a complaint on. And I think we need to know that and be part of that communication so we can see that things are being done. And we still got properties that we've been fighting for the last over 10 years, and things don't get resolved and don't get done. So I certainly would like to be in a little bit more in the know where we are with different projects like that. But other than that, I think it's a good program, except for the time frame, and just makes our city a better place to live, and keeps our property values up. Thank you.
Alderman Zelinski.
Yes, thank you. When you go about getting around to this and figuring out the plan, it would be really good for you to try and get in contact with Nan Roselle she owns Landlord Line. It's an apartment. She does like the maintenance she rents out apartment places. I think she's the president of the Fox Valley Apartment Association, and she likes to help communities figure out how to maintain landlords that don't care about their properties, as in essence, but she'll help you along, like how you can get a hold of some of these landlords and how it actually affects them and their ways of them renting it out. Nan Roselle. Thank you.
Is there any other questions? Alderman Nichols.
Thank you. Director Buck, could you tell us again who would be conducting these surveys?
Well, I see it primarily being Joe Polzine, the code enforcement specialist, but I don't think he's going to have the capability to do this many surveys. So as time permits, our new building inspector started in June will also conduct some of the surveys, and potentially a principal planner as well.
I have some concerns about the principal planner, building inspector, and even yourself. I think you mentioned yourself before, spending time doing this. In my mind, I don't quite see that task being part of a community development job description. Having said that, that's one of my first concerns. And you mentioned that there would be probably about 2,000 properties a year that would be surveyed, and then there would need to be lots of follow-up done on that. And would we still be accepting complaints during that time as well?
Correct. We would
Okay.
still be accepting complaints. And primarily the follow-up work would be work you'd see with the principal planner and myself, not necessarily the inspections or the surveys.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. would there be a plan to inform or educate people about this process?
In advance, there would not be. The surveys would take place. I mean, we would put something up on the website, of course, probably do a press release before the 2018, but there wouldn't be any type of workshops or anything. I mean, the codes are huge. But again, taking a more softer approach is sort of an education approach as well, on a case by case.
In my thinking about this, I'm backing up even a little further to the point where the property owner, the homeowner, sees a person in a yellow vest with a clipboard standing in front of their house looking around. And I'm thinking about what's going to be going through that homeowner's mind when they see that. And so, are there ways that we could get out in front of that?
I mean, we can post on social media, press releases. I mean, short of sending out letters to the surveyed areas or postcards in advance, which is something that could be done. We don't have that in our budget to be sending out mailings to every property
The horizon?
in the city. Pardon me?
The horizon?
We could put it in the horizon, potentially get it in the water bills maybe. There are avenues to try to get something like that out. I had not planned on doing that, but something we could do.
Thank you, just jotting down a little note there. Another thing that pops into my mind, it happened today as I was thinking more about this. I have, over the course of the last 4 years, worked very closely with the health department and the police department on and code enforcement on some pretty intense cases, both in my district and other people from other residents in the city who have contacted me. And so, knowing what that was like for me as an alderman, and trying to relate with the resident, and then having to work with the health department and the police department on issues that dealt with personal well-being of our residents. And, somewhat dangerous situations. I think that we need to be very careful and thoughtful about what we're trying to accomplish here. I think we also there's just a tiny percentage of people who just are simply happy with, well, they might not be happy, but they don't feel the need to comply. And anything that we do, it does not lead to compliance. We also have residents who are on very limited means, and Rock the Block has done great things in the Jefferson Park neighborhood and on Doty Island to work with property owners. And so if we were to move forward with this sort of program, I would be more open to it if we offered a carrot to folks instead of a stick. And so I think if this is going to be a council directive, then we as a body should give more thought and take the time to really consider and give thoughtful planning to how we might want to roll something like this out in the future.
Alderman Benner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I share Alderman Nichols' concerns about who would be spending time on this, and I just thought that possibly if we can get an intern or something that could do that during the summer months would probably be time well spent and probably decent experience for them as well, especially to be participant to a program like that and learn more about how that approach would be taken. At this time, I'll make a motion to forward on to council the introduction to the Code Compliance and Enforcement Property Survey Program as identified in the packet with, to start with a friendly approach followed up by a hardline approach to gain compliance. And
We have a
so,
motion, do we have a second? Yeah, we have a, Arnie. So we have a motion by Alderman Benner and a second by Alderman Collier to advance to the council. Is there any other discussion? Alderman Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Buck, on this survey cycle, beginning in April, why would we want, through the busy season where we'd be issuing citations and following up on these things, why would we want that part of the discovery during that time of year rather than November through April during the non-construction time of year when our employees are less busy and they don't have as many things to do at that time, and also then they could follow up on these things. So I'm thinking we're taking a slow time of year, and I think we could use it more effectively since we're only doing a visual from out front. And your thoughts on that?
Sure, there's multiple reasons why we will be doing it in April. We will be doing it in April because property maintenance.
Can you pull that a little closer? I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
We'll be doing it in April because property maintenance, especially exterior maintenance, is most obvious in the summer months. In the winter months, things are covered up with snow. Issues on buildings are not visible. You can get a lot of confusion with snow cover or ice cover on structures. By doing those things in the summer months, you also hit where most of the outdoor storage is in place. You can see the ground cover. Also, the employees aren't trudging through snowstorms and unplowed and unshoveled sidewalks, potentially. And that's typically why you're going to do property surveys during the summer months. And that it also gives the winter time somebody the opportunity in the winter to either arrange for spring work or potentially save up money to get that done or to find other resources.
That's why I was looking to have the discovery start early and give our citizens 6 months maybe to get ready for April, or 5 months to get ready for April when the construction season starts. And instead of just saying, hey, boom, they don't have that spendable income, and they might need that 6 months just to say, okay, this season, we got to fix this, we got to fix that. And I think it'd just be more beneficial to the citizens, especially citizens on fixed incomes. No?
I don't understand what the time of year is going to do with somebody on a fixed income.
I guess.
I mean, if they're contacting staff to set up an arrangement to comply, and they can't do that until the spring or the fall or the winter or whatever month you choose, we'll work with them on that. So I'm not sure what time of the year.
People always plan ahead with saving money and saving for a project, and if we could notify them the sooner that, in April, this process is going to begin for you, instead of just waiting for April or May and say, you got 2 weeks to fix this, and, and then the process starts,
Oh, yeah, and that's why we're recommending the approach where they work with staff to set up a compliance time, so they wouldn't have 2 weeks.
Okay. Well, I just think it doesn't spread our employees out over putting everything on one busy season. And then you got vacation time and things like that. During the really busy time of the year, I think Alderman Nichols said if somebody's standing out in front of your house with a clipboard, you know, a lot of this is pretty visual. It could be done from the curb, inside a car even, you know, because you said you can't enter the property, so pretty much everything's a visual from the sidewalk, or public street.
Correct.
You know, I had a guy last week walking in front of my house with a wheel and an orange shirt on. I said, "What's up?" And he said, "I'm doing a parking survey for the city." And I said, "Really?" And I didn't know anything about a parking survey coming up, but I asked him a question. He was in front of my house. So, I mean, you know, people ask questions if somebody's standing out there or if they're doing it from their car. But I think the time frame could work better for the citizens of the community. And I think also for our workers. Thank you.
Alderman Benner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to comment on a couple things Alderman Taylor said, and David touched on it a little bit, but I agree with our community development director that this is the right time of year to do it for a lot of the reasons he stated. Plus, if we can get an intern to do it, that's when you're going to have them, is during the summer months. Not only that, but when these folks get this letter, what I'd be interested in is them telling us what they can do. And a lot of them as homeowners are going to want to do a lot of their own work. And I can't imagine somebody want to be outside sprucing their house up right after they got done snow blowing. It's just probably not realistic. So the sooner we can get them notification, I think a lot of them will want to do some of this. I just can't imagine that they wouldn't. You're always going to get a percentage that will try to, no pun intended, buck the system. But I think for the most part, they're just going to, I think they're just going to, you know, just come in and tell us what they can do, what the expectation is, and then we'll just work with them to make that happen. And that's my thought. And as long as their spirit and intent is to comply with whatever direction it is that we give them, and they're being forthright with us, I can't see anybody beating their door down because in 30 days they don't have all their work done. So I think this is a good path. It's a good direction. I think it's a good way to go. And just kind of see where it goes. If it doesn't work, and then, you know, we're really not getting compliance, so I think that's another discussion to kind of see what it is we need to do. But I think for the most part, you have to give everybody the opportunity to do the right thing and go with it from that approach. So that's my opinion, and I'd like to move on with this. Thank you.
Alderman Nichols.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask Director Buck if he felt he has enough direction from the committee as to the enforcement approach.
Sure. Definitely. I think it was, unless I was confused, pretty consistent that the more friendly and approach, I guess, to the code enforcement is pretty obvious. That is the goal of the council, not to be heavy-handed. It's pretty consistent. I think I heard consistently that the council is more interested in the friendlier, less heavy-handed approach to code enforcement as far as it goes to the survey, not necessarily on the reaction-based code compliance. So yes.
Alderman Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, in respect to Alderman Benner, the socioeconomics between my district and his district are completely night and day. Usually you have two income people out there. They're probably, you know, they're all working in my district is a lot of people on assistance, a lot of people, older people retired. It's just completely different. When I moved to my house 30 years ago, I didn't realize this, that people didn't have cars. People would come past my house every other day to go to the grocery store, and they pull it in a wagon. And I was shocked that people couldn't even afford a car. And I was shocked by how many people there were that couldn't afford cars. And they're living, a lot of them are either have their own residence or they're living in these rental properties that these people just don't want to put a nickel into it. And I think the time frame should be adjusted for this ordinance. Thank you.
Just so I can clarify, Director Buck, when you discussed this, you did state that the department, when either a resident gets a notice, you'd be willing to work with them on any time frame. If it takes them a while to get the issue resolved, the department is willing to work with them as long as there's communication. Is that correct?
Certainly. The goal is to get compliance at the end of the day.
Right.
And so, yeah, if they're willing to work with us, great. If they're not willing to work with us, we'll have to go the traditional avenue.
All right, thank you. Is there any other discussion? If not, could we please have a roll call vote?
Motion carried on roll call 8-1. Excuse me. 7-1. Counting.
All right, with that, last thing is adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, seeing there's no further business, I move we adjourn.
Yeah, we have a motion by Alderman Stefanik and a second by Alderman Collier to adjourn. As soon as the clerk is ready, we'll take a roll call to adjourn.
Stop lying.
I think I'm abstaining.
Alderman Taylor,
Vote.
you need a vote for adjournment, and we're still missing Alderman Nichols also. Thank you.
Motion carried on roll call 8-0.
And we are adjourned.